beneath the restless waves of the Atlantic Ocean, where sunlight fades into a realm of shimmering twilight, there was a place that lived only in legend, Atlantis. It was said to have been a city of impossible beauty, marble towers crowned with gold, streets paved with coral, and gardens that bloomed with flowers no human eye had ever seen. Yet, far deeper than the ruins where human divers would one day search for treasure, Atlantis had another secret, one untouched by time, a hidden cavern, lit by glowing pearls the size of lanterns, was home to the last of her kind, Nerissa, the final mermaid of Atlantis. Her scales were the color of moonlight rippling across calm waters, and her hair flowed like strands of silver kelp, swaying gently in the current. Nerissa's eyes carried the sadness of centuries, for she had seen what no one else could remember, the rise and fall of her great city. Once Atlantis had thrived above the waves, its people walking proudly in the sun. But when greed and pride poisoned their hearts, the ocean rose to reclaim what was hers. Towers crumbled beneath raging storms, and the sea swallowed streets in a single night. Nerissa, still young, watched her people vanish beneath the waves, some transformed into sea creatures, others lost forever. She was spared, not by chance, but by an ancient promise. The ocean, in all her vast wisdom, had chosen Nerissa as her guardian, the keeper of Atlantis's memory, and so, for thousands of years, Nerissa wandered the deep, guarding the last fragments of her home. But there was a loneliness in eternity. She sang to the empty ruins, her voice carrying through the deep like the whisper of forgotten dreams. Whales would pause in their migrations to listen. Dolphins would circle her in joy, yet her heart longed for someone who could truly understand her song. One night, under the watch of a silver full moon, Nerissa felt something she had not felt in centuries, a disturbance in the water. The current shifted, carrying with it the faint rhythm of human breath. She swam toward the source, cautious but curious, weaving through coral arches and kelp forests until she saw it, a small wooden boat drifting dangerously close to the jagged rocks that guarded Atlantis's entrance. In it lay a man, unconscious, his arm dangling over the side into the black water. His skin was pale from the cold, his lips tinged blue. The storm above had battered his vessel, and the sea seemed ready to claim him. Nerissa hesitated. For centuries she had avoided humans, fearing their greed, but something in her heart stirred a memory of the world before the fall, when kindness still walked the earth. Without another thought, she rose from the depths and cradled the boat in her arms of silver scales. As her song wrapped around him like a blanket of warmth, his eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he seemed unsure if he was awake or lost in a dream. For before him floated a vision of impossible beauty, the last mermaid of Atlantis, and so began the story of how a guardian of the deep and a lost traveler would change the fate of a city long thought gone forever. The sun had slipped lower in the sky, its fading light spilling across the water like molten gold. Far beneath the waves, the last mermaid glided through a world untouched by human eyes, her tail trailing ribbons of silver in the dimming glow. The sea was quieter. Here only the soft hum of distant currents and the occasional call of a wandering whale filled the deep. She swam slowly, her fingers brushing the velvety edges of coral fans that swayed gently in the tide. Each one seemed to hold memories, ancient and unspoken, like faded pages in a book too delicate to touch. Her home, if it could still be called that, lay beyond a curtain of coral so dense it shimmered like a jeweled wall. The mermaid slipped. Through a narrow gap, her movements practiced, careful. On the other side was a small lagoon, hidden, secret, and sacred. It was the last remnant of Atlantis she knew, a place where the ruins had been claimed by the sea and softened by time. Columns carved with spirals and symbols rose from the sandy floor, their once sharp edges blurred by centuries of tides. Sea. Plants draped themselves over the stones like mourning veils. In the center stood what remained of the pearl altar, its surface cracked but still luminous, as though the stone held some memory of light even in the darkness. The mermaid approached it with quiet reverence. She placed her palm upon its surface, feeling the faint hum that still pulsed within. The altar had been the heart of Atlantis, a place where the ocean's blessings were called, where the bond between the merfolk and the sea was renewed. But now it was only a whisper of what it once was. Her eyes closed. For a moment, the world around her faded, and she could almost hear them, the songs of her people, the laughter echoing through the coral halls, the soft chiming of shells that once adorned their temples. But when she opened her eyes, there was only the stillness. Only her. She turned and gazed out toward the darker waters beyond the lagoon. Somewhere out there, the currents carried secrets and perhaps answers. She could feel it in the pull of the tides, in the way the sea seemed to breathe differently. Lately, there was change in the water, a change that called to her, yet she hesitated. For every current that carried life, there were depths that swallowed it whole. The ocean was both cradle and grave. Her tail flicked once, scattering a cloud of fine sand into the water, and with a slow breath, she began to swim toward the unknown. Behind her, the hidden lagoon grew smaller, its shimmering coral veil closing like the last page of a chapter. Ahead, the ocean deepened. The colors faded into blue, then into shadow, until even the light of the sun was no more than a faint memory above. And somewhere in that darkness, something was watching. The moon hung low over the horizon that night, casting a silver road upon the ocean's surface. Chimera drifted just beneath it, her pale fingers trailing through threads of glowing plankton that shimmered like fallen stars. She could feel the weight of the prophecy pressing against her heart, the idea that her song, the one she had not yet sung, could awaken the memories of Atlantis itself. But there was fear, too. Fear of what it might call, fear of what it might change. She swam toward the coral arches, an ancient gateway sculpted by time and the gentle hands of her ancestors. Each pillar was veiled in soft anemones, swaying with the tides as if bowing to greet her. This was where her grandmother had once sung the song of first light, a melody so pure it could draw dolphins from leagues away and coax coral to bloom overnight. Nymir closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the sea steady her breathing. The ocean's heartbeat pulsed around her, the deep bass of distant currents, the soft percussion of crabs scuttling over shells, and the faint, steady hum of life itself. She tilted her head back and began to hum. At first, it was only a whisper, a fragile thread of sound that tangled with the waves. But then, as her voice grew, the water around her began to shimmer. Schools of fish, drawn as if by invisible strings, swirled into spirals of silver and gold. Seagrass bent toward her, trembling with the vibrations. And then she felt it, a deep, ancient presence stirring far below. From the darkness beneath the arches, a faint glow began to rise. Shapes emerged, half-formed, like memories struggling. To the surface, towers of crystal, streets paved in mother-roof pearl, the shadow of a palace that had long since crumbled into sand. It was Atlantis, or rather, the echo of it. Her song was pulling its memory into the present, but with the beauty came something else, something colder, a presence that did not belong to the light. Nymera's song faltered as the glow shifted, deepening into a strange green haze. The fish scattered, the seagrass stilled, and from between the arches she saw two faint, glimmering eyes watching her from the depths. The ocean seemed to hold. Its breath, the dawn after their first journey together, broke with a quiet, rosy light that bathed the ocean in a golden shimmer. Althea floated near the surface, her eyes half closed as she listened not to the sound of the waves breaking above, but to something softer, deeper, the faint hum of the whispering tides. Her grandmother had told her stories about this rare phenomenon, currents that carried the voices of the past. Few merfolk ever heard them. Some believed it was the sea itself speaking. Others thought it was the lingering memory of Atlantis. But the truth, her grandmother would say, was that the whispering tides chose whom they spoke to. "Do you hear it?" Althea asked Kaelin, her voice hushed, as if speaking too loudly might scare the sound away. Kaelin tilted his head, listening. The ocean around them seemed still, yet in the stillness came a rhythm low and resonant, almost like a heartbeat. Then, faintly, the words emerged, so fragile they might have been mistaken for the wind. "The moon will guide you. The coral will remember." Althea's breath caught. She had heard that line before, in a lullaby her mother used to sing. But how could the ocean know? She reached for Kellen's hand. "It's speaking to me." Before Kaelin could answer, a sudden rush of silver fish darted past, shimmering like a trail of falling stars. They moved in a perfect spiral, leading toward the sunken archway, an ancient ruin deep within the seabed canyons. Legends claimed it was built before Atlantis, had even risen from the waves. "We should follow them," Kaelin suggested. The path took them lower, where light dimmed and shadows deepened. The archway emerged from the gloom, its stones draped with swaying seagrass and ancient carvings that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. As Althea brushed her fingers over the inscriptions, the glow intensified, forming shapes, first waves, then a rising moon, and finally, a pair of outstretched hands offering a single pearl. "It's a message," Kaelin murmured, "and I think it's meant for you." A chill tingled down Althea's spine. She remembered her mother's last words before vanishing into the storm. One day the sea will return what it has taken. The whispering tides returned, stronger this time, wrapping their voices around her. The journey has begun, but beware the shadows that walk beneath the waves. She turned to Kaelin, her heart pounding. "We're not alone down here." Far beyond the archway, a dark shape moved, watching, waiting. The ocean lay calm beneath the silver glow of the moon. Its surface shimmered like molten glass, each ripple a soft sigh in the darkness. Far below, in the cradle of the sea, Liriana rested upon a smooth bed of coral, her eyes half closed, listening. The currents carried whispers from faraway waters, echoes of whales calling, the gentle murmur of shifting sands, the heartbeat of the deep itself. Yet tonight, another sound floated through the water, distant and strange a melody, soft at first, like the memory of a lullaby. It curled around her like a ribbon of light. Liriana rose slowly, letting her tail sweep in slow arcs, her silver blue. Scales caught the moonlight filtering from above, scattering it in glimmers like falling stars. She followed the music through the winding canyons of the seabed, where glowing anemones lit her path, their tendrils swaying in the rhythm of the tide. The melody grew clearer, richer. It was not the song of any sea creature she knew it was. Layered, complex, filled with longing and sorrow. It pulled at her heart, urging her to come closer. At last, she emerged into a wide, open clearing beneath the waves. The moonlight poured down through a break in the surface, bathing the ocean, floor in silver. And there, upon a flat rock, sat an old merman, his hair like strands of pale seaweed, his eyes deep as the trenches. In his hands, he cradled a shell-shaped harp, its strings woven from strands of kelp, each note drifting like mist through the water. He looked up when she appeared, and his music faltered. "You hear it too," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. The song of the world changing. Liriana swam closer, drawn to both his presence and his words. "What do you mean?" she asked. He plucked another note, and it trembled like a tear. "The tides are shifting, little one. The stars above are moving. The old magic that binds our world to the surface is fading." His gaze held hers. "If the last song is not sung, both sea and land will fall silent." Liriana felt a chill run through her. Somewhere deep inside, she knew his words were true. The ocean's rhythm, the very pulse she had known since birth, felt fragile, and now the music in his harp seemed less like a melody and more like a warning. The merman smiled sadly and extended the harp toward her. "It will be your voice the ocean remembers." Liriana's fingers brushed the strings. The sound that bloomed was unlike anything she had ever heard, warm, infinite, and alive. It was as though the sea itself was singing through her. And in that moment, she understood. This was the beginning of something far greater than herself. Far above, the moon's reflection shivered on the waves. The song had begun. The ocean lay in a deep slumber. Its vast body breathed in long, steady pulses, the tide rolling like the chest of a sleeping giant. Moonlight filtered through the surface, slipping past curtains of silver plankton, until it reached the darker corridors where the last mermaid drifted alone. Her hair floated around her like a halo spun from midnight. Her eyes were half closed, not in tiredness, but in that meditative stillness that only the sea could teach. Around her, the ruins of Atlantis slumbered, two columns draped in coral, mosaics hidden beneath curling seaweed, arches leaning toward the seabed, as though they wished to rest forever. Yet there was something more than silence here. A faint hum, soft at first, like the vibration of distant whale song. She paused, listening. It was a sound she had not heard in centuries, a song carried not by wind or gull, but by water itself. It rippled through the currents, bending and weaving as if the sea were remembering a melody from long ago, drawn forward. She swam deeper into the old streets, past statues with missing faces, past marble steps now guarded by clusters of shellfish. As she moved, the song grew clearer, its notes trembling like silver threads in the dark. It spoke in no tongue she knew, yet its meaning swelled within her heart. A call, an invitation, and perhaps a warning. In the distance, a faint glow emerged. Not sunlight, for it was far too deep. Not fire, for flames could not live here. It was the gentle bloom of bioluminescence, swirling like ink in water, each mote pulsing to the rhythm of the mysterious tune she followed. When she reached the source, her breath caught. Before her stood the Gate of Echoes, a massive archway of pearlescent stone, etched with flowing symbols that shifted as though alive. The song was coming from within its hollow, frame a doorway leading into the blackest depths of the ocean trench. She hovered there, torn between fear and wonder. The gate seemed to breathe, and as she lingered, the melody changed, no longer just a call, but a harmony. As if the ocean itself were waiting for her to sing back, she opened her lips, and for the first time in 1,000 years, her voice joined the sea. The sound was soft, almost fragile at first, but with each note, the water around her shimmered, the ruins seemed to stir, and the gate's carvings began to glow brighter. Her song and the ocean's song entwined, weaving together like currents meeting in an endless tide. Something beyond the gate stirred in answer, something ancient, something that remembered her name. The sea was calm that day, as if holding its breath for something long awaited. The last mermaid drifted on gentle currents, her mind heavy with thoughts of what lay beyond the horizon. She had followed whispers in the tides, voices older than time, calling her toward a place few dared to go, the whispering forest beneath the sea dot. It was not a forest of trees as humans knew them, but a vast, living cathedral of coral spires and swaying kelp, their tendrils curling like ribbons in the dark blue water. Shafts of light filtered through from above, painting the scene in gold and emerald. And there, in the hushed stillness, the ocean seemed to speak, not in words, but in deep, resonant hums that vibrated in her bones. Every movement of the kelp, every flicker of fish weaving between coral branches seemed part of a slow, ancient song. The mermaid could feel it, wrapping around her heart, as though the forest remembered her people, and was glad she had come. She glided deeper, past curtains of seaweed, into shadowed groves, where strange creatures hid jellyfish glowing like lanterns, eels coiling lazily in their stone hollows, and sea turtles resting with eyes half closed, as if dreaming. In the distance, a great coral arch rose like the gate to another world, encrusted with shells and gleaming pearls. It was here that she heard it most clearly, the voices, soft, melodic, layered with centuries of memory. They told of storms that had reshaped the sea, of ships swallowed whole, of kingdoms drowned and reborn. And somewhere within those murmurs, the mermaid heard something meant for her alone, a name she had never been called, yet somehow recognized, drawn by the sound. She swam beneath the coral arch and found a hidden clearing, a circle of white sand lit by a single beam of sunlight. At the center stood a solitary shell, as tall as she was, shimmering with colors that shifted like the tide. The voices swelled, "Take what is yours." She reached out, her hand trembling, and as her fingers touched the shell, a surge of warmth spread through her. Images filled her mind, visions of Atlantis before it fell, of her people dancing in moonlit waters, of a promise yet to be fulfilled. The shell pulsed once, as if alive, and then the forest fell silent. The mermaid knew she had been given something precious, not just a gift, but a task. She did not yet understand its meaning, but she felt it would guide her to the truth she had been searching for all her life, and so, clutching the shell to her chest, she turned from the whispering forest and began her journey once more, the weight of destiny now cradled in her arms. The night settled over the ocean like a soft quilt of velvet and starlight. The waters glimmered with pale reflections of the moon, and far below the surface, the coral gardens of Atlantis lay bathed in a serene glow. Every coral branch shimmered, with life, their tips glowing faintly blue, as though they had captured fragments of the night sky. Schools of tiny, silver fish wove in and out of the coral, their movements slow and graceful. as if the very water around them had grown drowsy. Serenia swam through the garden with unhurried strokes, her long hair drifting in the current like a dark ribbon. She had always loved this place, its colors, its stillness, its sense of being untouched by time. Tonight, however, something felt different. The water carried a faint hum, a sound so low and resonant it seemed to come not just through her ears, but from the depths of her own heart. She followed the sound deeper into the garden, brushing past soft fronds of seaweed and over smooth stones patterned with ancient carvings. And then she saw it, a single pearl resting within an open clam, its surface glowing with an inner light. It was larger than any pearl she had ever seen, and the moment her fingers brushed it, the hum swelled into a song. The world shifted in an instant. Serenia found herself standing, not swimming in, an endless field of shimmering sand under a sky of molten gold. The waves beyond the shore were frozen mid-motion, as if time itself had paused, and from the horizon came a figure cloaked in flowing light, her face hidden, her steps silent. "You are the last." The figure's voice was like water over stone, soft yet echoing. And the last must remember. Before Serenia could speak, visions bloomed in her mind. The bustling streets of ancient Atlantis, its towers crowned with crystal spires, the great hall of tides where voices sang in harmony with the ocean, and finally, the moment the city sank, swallowed by darkness and silence. She saw merfolk scattering, fleeing into the deep, and others simply fading into the water like breath into the wind. The vision faded, and the golden sky began to dissolve into the deep blues of the coral garden. The pearl was still in her hand, its glow dimming. Serenia's heart pounded, for she knew the message had not been just a dream. Somewhere in the ocean's depths, a truth waited to be found, and it was calling to her. The air above the ocean had grown heavy, swollen with the scent of rain and the restless murmurs of the wind. Clouds, dark and trembling, gathered in the distance like a council of giants deciding the fate of the sea. The waves no longer rolled with their gentle rhythm. They had begun to rise, foam curling at their crowns, as though they too sensed what was coming. Nerissa floated just beneath the surface, her gaze tilted toward the dim light filtering through the churning water. The first drops of rain struck the sea like tiny drumbeats, their sound muffled yet strangely urgent in the world below. She could feel the storm's heartbeat through the pull of the currents, deep and slow at first, then quickening. This was no ordinary squall. The ocean whispered of something older, an ancient weather, born from magic and memory, capable of stirring more than just the waters. Her mother had once told her that storms could open hidden doors between worlds, if the right song was sung, that the thunder was not merely the sky's voice, but a key turning unseen locks. It had been a story Nerissa had loved as a child, imagining secret passages in the waves where light poured in like gold. Now, with the storm swelling above, she wondered if the tale had been more than just a bedtime fable. A flash of lightning speared through the water, bright as a silver blade. For an instant, the whole ocean seemed to breathe in. Nerissa closed her eyes and began to hum a low, trembling melody that rose from somewhere deep within her chest. The notes drifted into the water, curling and spiraling like ribbons of moonlight. The song was one she had never sung aloud before. It came to her not from memory, but from something older, something that felt as though it had been resting in her bones since before she was born. The words, if they could be called words, were not of any tongue she knew, yet each syllable seemed to fit perfectly against the rhythm of the waves. The sea began to answer, A soft glow unfurled in the depths, pulsing with her melody. The current shifted, wrapping around her like a gentle hand guiding her forward. Above, the rain fell harder, the storm gaining its voice, yet here in the watery heart of it, her song wove itself into the chaos. Something stirred beyond the veil of darkness vast, slow and shimmering. A shadow the size of a whale moved with impossible grace, its scales catching the faint glow of her music. Nerissa did not stop singing, even as her breath quickened. She felt as though she were no longer the only one shaping the song. The creature, whatever it was singing with her, and with each note they shared, the storm above seemed to bend, not in defiance, but in recognition. The ocean, the sky, and Nerissa's voice had become a single, living thing. Far to the north, where the sea turned to glass, beneath the frozen sky, winter reigned in endless silence. Icebergs drifted like pale mountains, their jagged peaks glowing with the faint blush of the low sun. Beneath this frozen kingdom, the waters were darker, heavier, yet alive with the muffled pulse of hidden currents. It was here that Serenia swam, her silver tail glimmering faintly through the gloom. She had followed the call of an ancient melody, a sound older than Atlantis itself. It was not a voice, not quite, more like the hum of the world's heartbeat, resonating through bone and soul. The deeper she swam, the colder the water became, until each breath felt like swallowing frost. The surface light faded, replaced by the eerie glow of bioluminescent creatures drifting in the black. Tiny jellyfish pulsed like living lanterns. Strange fish, with glassy eyes, stared from the shadows, unbelieved at last. The seafloor appeared, not as sand, but as an endless plain of ice, carved by centuries of shifting tides. Here, locked within the crystal depths, was something extraordinary. A structure of carved stone, its pillars entwined with frozen kelp, its walls etched with markings she recognized from the oldest Atlantean scrolls. The song grew louder. It was coming from within. Serenia swam closer, pressing her palm to the icy wall. The cold bit at her skin, but the sounds seemed to seep through her hand, flooding her mind with visions, towering ice castles that once floated. Upon these seas, merfolk who sang to the whales beneath the auroras, and a great queen with a crown of frost who ruled a kingdom now lost to snow and silence. A shadow moved within the ice. For a moment, Serenia thought it was a trick of light, but then she saw it clearly, a figure, feminine, with long flowing hair that seemed to drift in water though she was encased in crystal. Her eyes, half closed, glimmered faintly as if she were dreaming. The melody surged. It was her voice. Serenia pressed closer, heart pounding. She did not know if this was a ghost, a queen in slumber, or something far stranger. But she knew one thing. The song was not meant for the world above. It was a call, perhaps a warning, perhaps a plea, meant for those who could still hear the language of the deep. As the last notes faded into the stillness, Serenia felt the current shift around her, like the slow turning of a giant wheel. The ice groaned, echoing through the vast undersea chamber. Something was waking, and Serenia knew her journey was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. The sea was darker tonight, as though the moon had pulled its silver light away, leaving the waters wrapped in deep blue shadows. Nerissa swam slowly, her body weary from days of searching for the final pieces of the prophecy. The ocean floor beneath her was quiet, with only the faint sway of kelp and the occasional flicker of a passing fish. She could feel the weight of time pressing against her as though the tides themselves were urging her onward. Then, from far away, she heard it, a low, rumbling call that vibrated through the water, deeper than any song she had ever heard. It was not the language of merfolk, nor the chants of ancient sea spirits. This was older, stronger, a voice that had known the oceans before Atlantis itself. She followed the sound, letting it draw her through valleys of coral and over ridges of stone until the sea suddenly opened into a vast, moonlit expanse. And there they were, giants of the deep whales, with eyes like polished obsidian and scars that told stories of centuries past. Their great bodies moved with impossible grace, each slow movement stirring the water as though the ocean itself bowed to them. One whale, the largest she had ever seen, glided toward her. His voice rumbled through the currents, not in words, but in meaning, and somehow Nerissa understood. We remember Atlantis, her breath caught. She had heard legends that whales carried the memories of the world within them, that their songs were maps of history, stitched together by generations. We remember the night the city fell. The voice continued in her mind. We remember your people's cries and the fire beneath the sea. We remember the pearl. Nerissa's heart quickened. The heart of tides, she whispered. The whale's dark, I reflected her, small and fragile against the endless ocean. You seek it, but know this, mermaid, the pearl is not only power, it is a promise. Once awakened, it will call not just to you, but to everything that sleeps beneath the waves. Some will answer in peace, others in hunger. A shiver traced down her spine, and yet, without it, Atlantis cannot rise again. The whale's great tail stirred the water, sending a spiral of shimmering plankton between them. Then you must go where light dies, to the abyss of echoes. Her chest tightened. The abyss, a place even merfolk avoided, a trench so deep that sound itself was said to be swallowed whole. Before she could speak, the whale lowered his head, pressing his massive brow toward her in a gesture of solemn farewell. His skin was rough beneath her hand, but warm with life. Follow our song, he whispered in her mind. It will guide you to the edge. Beyond that, you will be alone. And then, with a sweep of his tail, he turned and began to swim away. The others followed, their silhouettes fading into the dark like drifting mountains. Yet their song remained, curling through the water like a silver thread, leading her toward the most dangerous journey yet. Nerissa took one last look at the open sea around her, then set her gaze forward. The abyss of echoes waited, and so did the truth. The sea had been restless for days. Waves rose higher than usual, their white crests curling like claws, and the wind carried a strange, mournful whistle. Even the dolphins swam deeper, avoiding the surface as if they knew something was coming. Serenia drifted near the edge of the coral cliffs, her tail sweeping in slow, deliberate arcs. She had felt it for nights, now the quiet tension that lived in the water, like the deep breath before a cry, and in the quiet spaces of her mind, an ancient melody kept returning. It was not hers. It belonged to the ocean itself. Far above, the sky had grown heavy and bruised, clouds swirling in a spiral that seemed to pull the horizon toward it. Shafts of light pierced through in sudden bursts, only to be swallowed again. Saronia, the oldest of the sea turtles, glided toward her and spoke in a voice as deep as the tide. The sea remembers, little one, and soon it will speak. That night, as the first drops of rain peppered the water's surface, Serenia swam out beyond the safety of the reefs. She could feel the pull now, a current that moved not with the wind, but with the rhythm of the song in her chest. The storm broke without warning. Thunder rolled like the beating of ancient drums, and lightning flashed across the waves, turning them into silver mountains. The rain was warm, almost tropical, but the wind cut sharp as broken glass. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but with her whole being. The song was vast and endless, a sound older than time itself. It rose from the deep trenches, from the bones of lost cities, and the whispers of creatures no one had seen for 1,000 years. Her eyes closed, and she sang back. The notes left her like pearls, shimmering as they passed into the water, and the sea answered, weaving her voice into its own. Around her, the fury of the storm began to shift, not weaken, but change. The waves no longer sought to crush. They began to lift and carry Dot in the glow of lightning. Serenia saw them shadows moving through the rain-flecked water, tall, elegant, forms with eyes like molten gold. Their tails were unlike hers, scaled in patterns of deep indigo and silver. They were not of Atlantis, but they were not strangers. One swam forward, his voice low and steady, carrying even through the roar. Of the storm, the song has woken us. You have called, and we have come. Serenia's heart beat faster. For so long, she had believed herself the last. But here, in the chaos of wind and water, she was no longer alone. The storm raged on, but its song had changed, becoming something fierce, yet beautiful, like a lullaby sung by the sea itself. And Serenia, surrounded by the others, knew this was not the end of her journey. The ocean was calm that night, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Lysandra sat upon a smooth, moonlit rock at the very edge of the reef, her tail half submerged, the water curling gently around the glimmering scales. Above, the stars scattered like silver dust across the velvet sky, their reflections trembling in the stillness of the sea. She closed her eyes, allowing the rhythm of the waves to fill her senses. Each ripple carried with it an echo of the past, a faint voice, a forgotten song, a memory too fragile to remain in the waking world. The ocean was speaking to her again, but in whispers too soft for any other ear. In those murmurs she heard the laughter of her mother, distant and sweet as the chime of seashell bells. She felt the warm pulse of Atlantis in its prime, the hum of crystal towers, the rush of market streets, the deep heartbeat of a city alive beneath the waves. It was not a vision, it was remembrance, rising like a tide within her. Dot, far beyond the reef, the great undercurrent stirred, a sign that change was coming. The old seers had always spoken of the whispering tides moments, when the sea would offer its children a choice, to cling to the past or to surrender it, letting the currents carry them forward. Lysandra's heart ached. She did not want to let go. Every coral street, every shimmering lantern of Atlantis, every voice she had loved, these were her anchor in a world that had already taken too much from her. And yet the tide whispered, "Nothing stays, little one. The sea carries all things." Onward, a soft splash broke her thoughts. Orion, the silver dolphin who had accompanied her since the storm, rose from the water, his sleek body glistening in moonlight. He clicked and whistled, his voice carrying urgency. Without speaking, Lysandra understood something was stirring. In the deep trenches to the east, the night air shifted, heavy with the scent of rain. And as she slid from the rock into the cool embrace of the water, she knew the tides of memory had finished their whispering. What came next would demand more than remembrance. It would demand courage, and the ocean, vast and eternal, was waiting. The ocean had grown darker than night. Even the faint blue glow that had followed Nerissa since she left Atlantis was swallowed by the abyss ahead. It was not just darkness, it was depth, an ancient and immeasurable depth that seemed to pull at the soul. The currents here whispered differently. They no longer sang songs of coral reefs or swayed with the rhythms of tides. Instead, they spoke in long, slow breaths, as if the sea itself were holding back a truth too heavy to share. Nerissa hovered in the stillness, her tail barely moving. Her every instinct told her this was no ordinary place. Before her lay the chasm of eternity, a wound in the ocean floor said to have no bottom. Atlantean scholars claimed it connected to worlds beyond, where the sea became something else entirely, a place where time did not flow, and the stars could be touched from below. She thought of the stories her mother once told her, of sailors who had fallen into the chasm and returned years later with eyes that glowed like moonlight, speaking in voices that were not entirely their own. Some never returned at all. She reached forward, letting her fingers skim the thin veil where light ended and the abyss began. It was colder here, not the sharp chill of deep waters, but the kind of cold that seemed to seep into the bones, whispering to the mind, inviting it to let go. From below, a pulse came faint, slow, like the heartbeat of some vast creature. It was not threatening, nor entirely welcoming. It was simply there, waiting. A swirl of movement caught her eye, not fish, not any creature she knew, but shapes made of shadow and shimmer, swirling as if both real and unreal. They twisted around her in graceful spirals, and though she could not hear words, she felt a presence. Watching, Nerissa closed her eyes, letting the darkness wrap around her. It was not fear that guided her now, but the strange certainty that the answers she sought about Atlantis, about her own fate, were hidden in this depth. And so, with a final glance at the familiar waters behind her, she began her slow descent into the abyss. The last thing she saw before the light vanished entirely was a single golden scale drifting upward from the darkness, warm, gleaming, and impossibly familiar. The ocean was calm that night, its surface gleaming under a silver moon, as if the heavens had placed a mirror upon the sea. The Last Mermaid floated just beneath that shimmering veil, her eyes closed, her mind drifting between the realms of dream and waking. The tides no longer tugged at her to wander. They seemed instead to cradle her, as though the sea itself had decided she had traveled far enough. For years she had searched. For years she had sung to the empty waters, her voice a melody without a chorus. Yet tonight the silence felt different, not empty, not lonely, but whole. The world above had shifted. New islands had risen, old shorelines had faded, and the winds carried strange scents she did not recognize. The world below had changed to coral gardens, bloomed in shapes she had never seen, and fish swam in colors that seemed borrowed from dreams. The mermaid glided through a canyon of deep sapphire rock, where ancient carvings still whispered the language of Atlantis. She brushed her fingers across the markings. Stories of storms survived, of ships guided safely to shore, of songs that healed broken hearts. These were her people's gifts to the world, scattered like seashells. For anyone who would listen, as she swam deeper, the water grew warmer, lit by a faint golden glow. She followed it until she found a hollow chamber within the rocks, where a single pearl the size of her head rested on a pedestal of coral. It pulsed softly, like the beating of a heart. She knew it instantly. This was the heart of the sea, the last remnant of Atlantis's magic. She approached slowly, her hair drifting like strands of kelp around her face. The pearl's light touched her skin, and she felt the warmth of every memory she had carried, every friend she had lost, every smile she had given, every song she had sung into the vastness. A single tear slipped from her eye, dissolving into the water before it could fall. And then she understood. The sea had never been empty. Her people's voices had never truly vanished. They had been here all along, in the laughter of the waves, in the hush of the currents, in the sigh of the deep. Atlantis had not been destroyed. It had been transformed, scattered into the ocean itself. And she was not the last mermaid. She was simply the keeper of the song. The pearl glowed brighter, and from the darkness came the faintest echoes, other voices, distant yet familiar, weaving into her melody. One, then another, then many. It was as if the ocean had finally decided to sing with her. With a steady breath, she began the final song. It was slow, gentle, and endless, carrying both joy and sorrow, past and future. The sound drifted far beyond the chamber, far beyond the reefs, far beyond the moonlit waves, until it touched every corner of the ships, sailing at night, paused in the water as their crews heard it, a lullaby in no known tongue, and yet it filled them with peace. Wails rose from the depths to join the harmony. Even the wind slowed, listening. When the last note faded, the mermaid smiled. She no longer needed to search. The song was not hers alone now. It belonged to the ocean once more, and in that eternal choir, she would never be alone again. Above, the moon sank toward the horizon. Below, the ocean returned to its quiet. Rhythm, the keeper of the song, drifted into the dark, not vanishing, but becoming part of the sea itself. And somewhere, even now, if you listen closely on a still night, you may hear her voice, the last mermaid of Atlantis, still singing beneath the waves.